It's the ultimate irony. The superstar who put Louisiana on the map, now banned from performing there. NBA YoungBoy, one of the most streamed artists in the world, can't even take the stage in the very state that raised him. His music bleeds Louisiana. His slang, his sound, his pain, all of it came from Baton Rouge. Yet the moment he tries to come home, the doors slam shut. But this story isn't just about a ban. It's about a man who built an empire out of chaos, who turned trauma into lyrics, and who now faces the harsh reality that fame doesn't always mean freedom. Behind the numbers, behind the headlines, there's a deeper question. Why does Louisiana keep turning its back on its own son? In the streets of Baton Rouge, YoungBoy is a legend. But to the system, he's a liability. His name alone draws massive crowds. And with those crowds come problems. Fights, shootings, chaos. Officials say it's public safety. His fans call it targeting. YoungBoy calls it betrayal. Tonight we peel back the layers. The fame, the fear, the fallout. Because what's happening to NBA YoungBoy is bigger than one rapper's tour. It's a reflection of how far someone can rise and how quickly the system reminds them where they came from. This is the untold story of NBA YoungBoy's ban from Louisiana and the emotional reaction that shook the hip-hop world before the millions of YouTube views, before the platinum plaques, before the world knew his name. There was Kentrell Deshaun Galden, a kid growing up in North Baton Rouge, raised by his grandmother while his father served time. YoungBoy's childhood was a cocktail of struggle and survival. Violence wasn't a headline, it was an everyday reality. The streets of Baton Rouge shaped him. Every block, every story, every loss became fuel for his music. When he first started recording in 2015, his sound wasn't polished. It was raw emotion over heavy 808s. But that rawness hit home. His pain felt real because it was real. Louisiana has always produced artists who mirror its contradictions, soulful yet scarred, brilliant yet broken. From Boozy Badazz to Kevin Gates, the state has a legacy of rappers who speak their truth no matter the cost. YoungBoy was the next in line, but with him came a new generation. A louder, bolder, and more digital version of the Baton Rouge story. By 17, he wasn't just another rapper. He was the voice of the youth. His mixtapes like 38 Baby and AI YoungBoy were anthems for kids who felt unseen. His delivery was urgent, his lyrics personal, and his authenticity undeniable. Fans didn't just listen, they related. But that authenticity came with baggage. Because in Louisiana, the same streets that made him also tried to destroy him. Baton Rouge police saw his rise not as a triumph, but as a threat. His shows attracted thousands, and with that came attention, not all of it good. Even in his earliest interviews, you could hear it in his tone. YoungBoy loved Louisiana, but he didn't trust it. "They don't want to see you win where you from," he once said. "They either love you or hate you, and sometimes it's both." The deeper his fame grew, the more complicated his relationship with his home became. Local officials saw crowds in chaos. Fans saw energy and expression. And somewhere in between, YoungBoy was trying to balance being a superstar and still just a kid from Baton Rouge trying to make it out. For him, Louisiana wasn't just a place, it was identity. Every lyric carried the accent, the rhythm, the hurt of home. But as the spotlight grew brighter, the shadows of his past began to stretch longer. And before long, the same city that raised him would start building the case to keep him out. By 2017, NBA YoungBoy wasn't just Baton Rouge's next star, he was the star. Every new release went viral within hours. His YouTube channel alone became a global phenomenon, clocking hundreds of millions of views monthly. YoungBoy didn't need mainstream radio. His fan base lived online. They spread his music like gospel, and in return, he gave them raw emotion in its purest form. But with the rise came noise. Fame amplified everything: his success, his temper, his mistakes. Each arrest became a headline. Each social media rant became a viral moment. To some, he was the definition of troubled genius. To others, a ticking time bomb. Still, there was no denying his influence. Every mixtape hit harder than the last. AI YoungBoy 2, Until Death. Call My Name, top. Each one showcased an artist growing more honest, more introspective, but also more isolated. Behind the fame, there was pain. Every lyric hinted at the cost of success, the paranoia of betrayal, and the constant feeling of being misunderstood. Louisiana, his home, remained a constant in his lyrics. But physically, it started to feel like enemy territory. Police in Baton Rouge kept a close eye on him. Concert permits got harder to secure. Promoters whispered about risk factors. The same venues that once welcomed him started closing their doors. And yet, no matter how many obstacles appeared, YoungBoy's connection to his fans only deepened. They didn't see a criminal, they saw a survivor. Every setback only fueled his legend. He became the voice of pain, rebellion, and authenticity in a world that often silenced it. Still, something in him began to shift. The deeper he went into fame, the further he drifted from peace. In interviews, you could see it, that tension between love for his roots and the scars they left. He wasn't the kid from North Baton Rouge anymore. He was a global name, living under constant surveillance and scrutiny. And with every new success, the distance between him and Louisiana widened. The crowds were still loyal, but the system had already made up its mind. Officials didn't see the artist, they saw the headlines. They saw the violence that sometimes followed his shows, the confrontations, the arrests. That's the tragedy of fame for someone like YoungBoy. No matter how far he rises, the world keeps measuring him by where he started. And for him, that place was Baton Rouge. Beautiful, brutal, and unforgettable. But the tension that had been brewing between YoungBoy and his home state was about to explode. Because while his music was dominating the charts, the streets, and the law were preparing to remind him who really held the power. For every chart-topping hit, there was an arrest. For every platinum record, a new headline. It became a cycle that felt almost predictable. Success, controversy, release, repeat. And each time, Louisiana played a role. In 2019, a shooting outside a Miami hotel left one person dead, and though YoungBoy wasn't charged for pulling the trigger, the headlines stuck to him. Then came more arrests, drug charges, probation violations, house arrests. The system never seemed to give him room to breathe. What made things worse was how much of it tied back to his image. Authorities argued that his concerts attracted chaos, fights, gunfire, crowds that were hard to control. Some cities in Louisiana began quietly denying permits for YoungBoy shows. They didn't say it outright, but promoters started to talk. They don't want him here. To the fans, it was personal. How could the state that birthed him be the one trying to silence him? To the system, it was simple: public safety. But under that label was a deeper bias, the fear of what his name represented. YoungBoy's fame didn't come from being clean-cut. It came from being real, brutally, unapologetically real. He didn't pretend to be a role model. He reflected his environment. And that made people uncomfortable. His lyrics, his attitude, his defiance, they weren't what institutions wanted representing Louisiana on a global stage. Yet even with that tension, he kept creating. His studio became both sanctuary and battleground. He was fighting not just legal cases, but perception itself. Every day, it felt like he had to prove he was more than the mugshots, more than the accusations, more than the violence attached to his name. He often spoke about feeling trapped, not just by the courts, but by his reputation. "They don't see me for who I am," he once said in a leaked clip. "They see what they want to see." That statement summed up everything. To his fans, he was a generational talent. To Louisiana's law enforcement, a risk. To the industry, a mystery that kept selling records. But all of that tension, years of mistrust between him, the police, and the state, came to a head in 2024 when Louisiana made the decision official. NBA YoungBoy would not be allowed to perform in the state that raised him. The ban wasn't just symbolic, it was emotional. It was a message that no matter how far he'd come, his home still didn't trust him. For an artist whose identity was built on survival and loyalty to his roots, it was the deepest cut imaginable. The man who made Louisiana proud was now being pushed out of it. And that pain, that betrayal, would become the fuel for one of the most emotionally charged reactions of his entire career. The announcement didn't come from a press conference or a news outlet. It started as whispers. Promoters began to talk. Local law enforcement sent quiet warnings. If YoungBoy comes to Louisiana, we can't guarantee safety. Those few words carried enough weight to stop everything. By early 2024, it became official. NBA YoungBoy, one of the biggest artists Louisiana had ever produced, was banned from performing in his home state. Not suspended, not postponed, banned. The reasoning was public safety concerns. Officials cited past concert incidents, brawls, shootings, police responses, and chaos in venues. They claimed it wasn't about targeting him personally, but protecting citizens. Yet for anyone who knew the history between YoungBoy and the system, that explanation felt hollow. Because if safety was the issue, why did those same venues host other artists, some just as controversial, without problems? Why was it only his name that sent alarms through police departments? Behind the scenes, promoters were frustrated. Fans were furious. Louisiana had lost its most famous modern artist, and everyone knew it. Social media erupted. How can you ban a man from his own state? Y'all scared of his fans but love his music. Louisiana don't protect its legends. But while the internet debated, YoungBoy himself stayed silent. For a while, you have to understand something about him. He doesn't react instantly. When he does speak, it's because the pressure has reached its breaking point. And this time, that pressure was personal. Louisiana wasn't just a place on a map. It was where his grandmother raised him. It was where he buried friends. It was where he first picked up a mic and dreamed of something more. To be told he couldn't come home, not even for his fans, not even for one show, hit harder than any diss, harder than any legal charge. For weeks, fans speculated how he'd respond. Some thought he'd go live and vent. Others believed he'd drop a song. But what came next was quieter and more powerful. From his home in Utah, under house arrest, YoungBoy released a track that wasn't about flexing, money, or fame. It was about pain. You could hear the exhaustion in his voice, not just from fighting cases, but from fighting to be understood. The lyrics hinted at betrayal, at the feeling of being unwanted by the place that made him. And while he never said Louisiana directly, everyone knew who he was talking about. It wasn't rage this time. It was heartbreak. To many, that song was more than a response. It was a declaration. He didn't need Louisiana's approval anymore. He had millions around the world who loved him. But deep down, everyone knew, a part of him would always want that validation from home. And that's the paradox of YoungBoy's story. No matter how big he gets, his heart stays where the pain began. He can leave Louisiana, but Louisiana never leaves him. When the ban finally became public, the world expected anger. After all, this was NBA YoungBoy, the rapper known for confrontation, for passion, for never holding back. But what came instead was silence. For days he said nothing. No posts, no rants, no tweets. Fans wondered if he was strategizing or if the reality had just hit too deep. Then, slowly, pieces of his reaction began to surface through snippets, song lyrics, and cryptic posts. In one of his more introspective moments, he wrote, "I gave my city everything, but they still see me as the villain." That line told you everything. Behind the tattoos, the platinum records, and the guarded attitude was a man who still cared deeply about being accepted, not by the world, but by the place that made him. People close to YoungBoy said the ban didn't just frustrate him, it broke him in ways that fame couldn't fix. He'd already been fighting legal restrictions, living under house arrest in Utah, isolated from the world. Music was his only outlet. And now, even the dream of performing back home, a dream that kept him motivated, was gone. For an artist like him, performance isn't just entertainment. It's therapy. It's release. Being on stage in Louisiana would have been a full circle moment, the boy from Baton Rouge standing victorious in front of his city. The ban took that away. In the following weeks, YoungBoy's tone in his music changed. There was more reflection, less rage. Songs that once sounded like war cries now felt like confessions. You could hear the loneliness, the resentment, and the quiet acceptance that maybe, just maybe, home wasn't meant for him anymore. But what made his reaction powerful wasn't just the sadness, it was the clarity. For once, he seemed to understand that trying to win over Louisiana might be a losing game. That his destiny, no matter how painful, was bigger than Baton Rouge. Still, fans rallied for him. Hashtags like "Just Let YoungBoy Perform" and "Free YB in Louisiana" began trending. Supporters flooded comment sections of local officials and venue pages, demanding they lift the ban. To them, this wasn't just about one artist. It was about the system's double standards. about how young black artists from the streets are punished for the environments they were born into. But the authorities didn't budge. For YoungBoy, it became a lesson in loyalty, the kind that doesn't always get returned. And though he rarely admits it publicly, his music tells the truth. He's tired. Tired of fighting for a city that doesn't fight for him. Tired of trying to prove that he's more than the chaos they attach to his name. Still, in his silence, there's defiance. Because one thing about NBA YoungBoy, he always finds a way to turn pain into art. And even when Louisiana tries to silence him, his voice reaches farther than they could ever stop. The moment word spread that NBA YoungBoy was banned from performing in Louisiana, the internet went into overdrive. Social media lit up with outrage, memes, think pieces, and emotional reactions from his fan base, the Never Broke Again Army. The Never Broke Again Army. For the fans, this wasn't just a local issue. It was a betrayal. YoungBoy wasn't some outsider. He was Louisiana. His voice carried the accent, the struggle, the slang, the rhythm of their lives. Banning him felt like erasing a part of the state's identity. Twitter exploded with fury. How you ban a man that made your city famous? They scared of his influence, that's all it is. Louisiana don't protect its artists. It polices them. YouTubers and commentators began analyzing the ban like it was a political act. Some argued it was a move to make an example out of him, a message to other young artists that success doesn't buy immunity. Others said it was jealousy, plain and simple. Officials couldn't stand that a kid from the trenches had more power, money, and influence than they ever would. But the industry's reaction was more complicated. Some artists defended him publicly. Rappers like Boozy Badazz and Kevin Gates, both Louisiana natives, spoke about the unfairness of seeing their state turn its back on its most successful son. They remembered when they, too, had faced police pressure during their early careers. Behind the scenes, though, the industry saw the bigger picture. YoungBoy had become too unpredictable to control. Labels loved his numbers but feared his volatility. Promoters wanted the crowds but dreaded the risk. Everyone was caught between admiration and anxiety. Still, the ban only added to his legend. YoungBoy's name began to symbolize rebellion against the system, not just a rapper but a movement. His supporters saw him as someone who couldn't be bought, silenced, or tamed. Every restriction the world threw at him only seemed to make him stronger. Yet under all that hype, there was tragedy. Because for all the online noise, the one thing he wanted, to stand on a Louisiana stage, look his fans in the eyes, and say, "I made it," was now impossible. The media painted him as controversial, dangerous, unpredictable. But rarely did they talk about the loneliness that came with his fame. The fact that, even at the top, YoungBoy lived isolated, away from crowds, away from home. As the months passed, the conversation began shifting. Fans started to realize that this ban wasn't just about one show. It was symbolic of something larger. How the system often fears the very voices that rise from its margins. From the streets of Baton Rouge to fans across the world, people began questioning, if you silence the artist who speaks the truth of his people, what message does that send? The fallout wasn't just cultural, it was personal. For YoungBoy, it marked the end of an era. The boy who dreamed of rapping his way out of Louisiana had done it. But now, Louisiana itself was off limits. Some nights, you can almost imagine it, YoungBoy alone in his Utah mansion staring out over the mountains. A world away from the humid streets of Baton Rouge where it all began. He has the money, the fame, the family, everything he once dreamed of. But there's a silence that no platinum plaque can fill. That silence is Louisiana. Every artist wants to be recognized by their city. It's the ultimate validation, to go back where it all started and be celebrated as the one who made it out. But for YoungBoy, that dream has turned into a wound that won't heal. Over the past year, he's released music that feels heavier, wiser, and more self-aware. Songs where he questions who he's become, where he wonders if the love he gave ever meant anything. You can sense it. He's starting to see fame not as freedom, but as another kind of prison. The ban from Louisiana forced him to confront what home really means. Maybe home isn't a place anymore. Maybe it's the people who still believe in him, his kids, his fans, his circle. Because the physical doors might be closed, but spiritually he's still there. Every bar he spits, every pain he relives, it's all Louisiana. And maybe that's what scares them most. You can ban his shows, but you can't ban his influence. You can silence his concerts, but you can't silence the movement. YoungBoy's career now stands at a crossroads. He's one of the most streamed artists in the world, yet also one of the most misunderstood. He's fighting to evolve, to break free from the version of himself the world refuses to let go of. The question isn't whether Louisiana will ever lift the ban. The question is, does he even want them to anymore? Because maybe after everything, his success isn't about going back. Maybe it's about proving that you can lose your home and still build your kingdom. In the end, NBA YoungBoy's story isn't just about rebellion, it's about resilience. It's about a young man who turned trauma into triumph, who lost the world he came from but found his voice echoing across the globe. Louisiana may have banned his shows, but it can't erase his legacy. Because no matter where he stands, the sound of his struggle, the sound of home, will always follow him. At the end of the day, it's not about the ban. It's about what it represents. A young man who gave everything to his craft, the raw emotion, the truth, the pain, only to find himself locked out of the place that created him. Louisiana may have turned its back, but the world didn't. Every stream, every comment, every fan chanting his lyrics across the globe is proof that NBA YoungBoy's voice can't be confined by state lines or court orders. He's bigger than Baton Rouge now, not because he left, but because he learned how to survive without its approval. Maybe that's what growth really looks like. Losing the love of home, but gaining the power to define your own legacy. And as YoungBoy stands on that edge between past and future, one thing is clear. No ban can silence a story this real. If you made it this far, drop a in the comments and tell me, do you think Louisiana went too far banning YoungBoy, or was it justified? Hit subscribe, because this story isn't over. And when YoungBoy makes his next move, you know we'll be here to break it all down.